to the book club. Today I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Camille. Hello, Camille.
Hello.
And we're joined by authors Miranda MacLeod and T.B. Markinson. Hello.
Hello.
And welcome.
Hello.
Lovely to have you join us today. You've both recently co-authored a book, a lovely, charming Sapphic romance called Two of a Kind. Let's start by talking about how did the idea come about of the book? Whose idea was it, and who decided it was going to be on a ranch in Wyoming?
Can I start off answering that one? This is TB. I came up with the idea many months ago, and I was like, I want to base it on this movie I really liked in the 80s called Some Kind of Wonderful, and I want to call it Two of a Kind. And we started chatting about it and everything. By the time the book finished, it was no longer anything like the movie Some Kind of Wonderful. Somehow we ended up starting it in Vegas and then moving it to a ranch in Wyoming. And then after the end, when I was writing my launch emails for my team, I knew I based it on an 80s movie, but it changed so much I couldn't remember what it was until 5 days later when I started thinking about it. It was the only thing that stayed was Two of a Kind, my title. That's the only thing that stayed from that start, the kernel of the idea to the final product. And that's kind of how it is with us, especially when Miranda has a really vivid imagination. And so whenever I'm like, we should do it this way, and she's like, okay, but. And then when I hear that but, I know I'm going to get about 50 different ideas all in 60 seconds.
So do you want to add to that, Miranda?
It was I had forgotten about the movie because it was such a long time back that we were talking about it and putting it on the schedule, and it does. I think every time we start talking about a plot, we'll get to a point where I'm sure TB says, "Great, we've nailed it. We're completely ready to do this," and then the next day I'll say, "Okay, I had some ideas." I was thinking about this last night, and it occurred to me that none of the things that we talked about are going to work, but here's a whole new idea.
She's done that to me quite a few times, and it depends what stage we're at in the co-writing process. My reaction, if I haven't written a word yet, I'm more like, oh, great, tell me about it. If we're 3 or 4 chapters in, I'm like, are you kidding me?
So when you discuss your initial idea, do you know which way the book is going to go? Have you got with the middle and the end plotted as well?
It tends to be, beginning is heavily plotted. The middle is a bit fuzzy. Sometimes we'll have an ending image in mind, and especially if the opening scene of the book is a very strong, if it's a very strong image that kind of inspires, we want to take that character from this place in their life, and then the best way of ending it would be like this, then that, sometimes we know what we're working toward. Of course, we write romances, so we're always working toward the happily ever after ending, which does make it easier. But a lot of times I think our first several chapters, we really know. First they have to do this, then they have to do this. This is how we want them to meet. This is how we want that to go. These are the things that happen next. And then maybe we have an idea something in the middle. and then we have to get it to an ending. And then in between, we're usually probably plotting out at least a few chapters ahead. And I think it's that middle part that can get tricky, where there's all of the options to consider and what should we really do. And by the time we hit the second half of the book, it often goes faster because now that we've made some decisions, the ending is more clear and the way to get there is clearer. So a lot of times we get bogged down a little bit. Like I said, we try to write 4 or 5 chapters in a week, but sometimes that means that we write 2 chapters in 1 week and then we write 7 chapters the next week because now we know where we're going with it, so it's a lot faster and easier to do.
Yeah, the most difficult part actually is getting those first solid 5 chapters, because the beginning kind of predicts what the end's going to be. Say you're writing a Christmas romance and you started out on Christmas Eve and your main character is sad because she doesn't have a date and she would like to be in a relationship. So more than likely you're going to want to like loop back to that in the end where it's Christmas again and she's happy and she's in love. So you kind of really need to work getting the beginning right seals the end. And so that's why we kind of start off more slowly with the beginning chapters, because you really have to nail those, because that really does the whole character arc.
And making sure that the character arc is different. Sometimes TV will point out, like, you've already used that joke in a different book. Getting those early things, making sure that you're not falling back on a reason or an excuse that a character would have used. Like, why are they not happy right now? Or what's the internal conflict for them? It's probably the most exciting part of it is when you can actually answer that question, but it's before you have that answer, it's also the scariest time.
Claire says on the podcast we co-host together a lot, like when you're trying to come up with like a twist with your plot, with your characters, I can't remember where she got this tip, but it was like, write down 10 things and then like kind of go through them and like tick off the ones that you either have already done or the ones that are like the most obvious, which I think is how we ended up on a ranch in Wyoming, because we've never done that before. So
given that we used all of our knowledge and research about ranches in that book, I'm fresh out of ranch stories. So.
Yeah, like I was amazed to find, because I have ranching in my family. It goes back a couple generations and everything. And so when Miranda suggested a ranch in Wyoming, I'm like, oh, I could totally do that. And then I realized I know nothing about it. I'm such a city girl. And I was like, she was like, what's Wyoming like? And I'm like, there's a lot of dirt. That's all I can remember. That was my contribution.
It did take a lot of reading, autobiographies from ranchers and watching ranch videos. There's like YouTube channels that are ranchers that show this is the day in the life on my ranch. And so we watched a lot of those. It's become more helpful to Google Maps, the street view, given that it's been harder the last few years to travel anywhere. Being able to go onto the street view to just see if they're in this town and they're standing on this street corner, is there there's a cafe. They can go to the cafe. Like, you can describe it just from those pictures, which is nice.
What's the most challenging part to co-write a book?
Well, I think one of the reasons it works really well, and this would also be a challenging part, is I don't know how many people know this, but Miranda and I go back, way back. We were born in the same hospital 9 weeks apart? I always get the number wrong. See, I'm terrible with numbers. But we were born and we went to the same elementary school and junior high, and I moved away in high school. So you have that familiarity, which works really well until we butt heads about a plot point, and then we can kind of get a little heated pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that we're both used to it, and we know, I know that the challenge, having recently worked with a different author, and I know TB has worked with other authors as well. When we're working together, because we've done it now so many times, like we've talked about recording some of our Zoom calls just because I don't think people would believe how blunt and rude we can be. We're just like, no, that's a terrible idea. We're not doing that. Are you crazy? But in general, working with authors that you don't know that well, or that you don't have that comfort level, it's that we all, I think at least every author I've met, like, we all simultaneously believe that our ideas are absolutely terrible and that we're the worst authors on the planet, but also our ideas are the best ideas and we're the best author on the planet. So talking to another person and they're presenting an idea or they've written a chapter, and knowing that you're whatever you say is both going to be met by an ego of like, we can't change that because that's the way it is, but also like, you're right and I'm terrible and I should never write anything again. Figuring out how to talk about the plots, the ideas, the changes without stepping into that trap.
You learn with co-writing with someone else to kill your darlings even more than you normally would on your own. And if people don't know what kill your darlings is that one like line or one plot point that you just absolutely love, but it doesn't advance your story, and it's called kill your darling. So when you co-write with someone, especially since we've done a handful of co-writes together now, like we both you see it more from someone else's perspective. So like Miranda could read one of my chapters and be like, I like this, but this part definitely has to go. And then I can do the same when it's her writing, but when it's yours, it's much harder. So it also, with the co-writing, with my drafting the first draft and then Miranda working on the second, like we're catching them earlier than like when you sit down at the end and you read the whole draft on your own, and then you're like, oh, this should have changed in chapter 3, and now I have to rework the remaining 17 chapters.
Right.
So we catch it faster, but it does present a challenge because we can be really blunt and sarcastic to each other. I mean, we usually end up laughing a lot, and we do think we should record our Zoom calls because they would be funny. It's one of those challenges where we have to balance our sarcasm, our sense of humor, and remember that the overall goal is to produce the best product we can for the reader. This job can be really lonely.
Yeah.
And so like we were able, especially during the pandemic, I think it was something that saved both of our sanities, because we do get on a Zoom call in the morning and we discuss the chapter that's going to be written. And like, it just tethers you to reality and other human beings, which was always key for the past 2 years, at least for my experience.
We happen to both have a different strengths and weaknesses. So when like TB's biggest strength has been to take the idea and to get a draft on paper, so that she can, we can talk about a chapter and she can be writing portions of it while we're talking, and just putting that first draft down so that you have something to work with. And that's the hardest part for me. I open up a blank document and I stare at it and I get hung up on every word and I go back and change sentences, and that has been the biggest struggle. So that, but what I can do a lot faster in many cases is that second pass, that where you're refining it and, changing, getting the details in and that type of thing, which I think for TB is often the place where she would come to a halt. So when she gets that first part down, and then I can open up a file and I'm like, oh, look, there's already 1,000 words on this page. Oh, it's like magic. And then I can go through it. And so we can, when we're really on track, we're getting like a full chapter done per day. And by the time we get to the end of the day, that chapter is already in its second draft. It's ready to go to the editor.
Before we send it to the editor, you make it sound really, really fast. I mean, we are much faster than when we work separately. But before we send it to the editor, I sit down for the final 2 days and I read it all the way through at once. That way you can catch all the inconsistencies or, right. Oh, wow, our main character's eye color changed. That's weird. Like all the stuff that you forget.
Once it comes back from the editor, there's that last step of going through all of those suggestions and changes. So it keeps us going. It keeps us motivated. So doing the co-writes, I think we both end up coming out of it at the end of a year with having written more than we would have if we had been trying to do it all on our own.
What really surprised me was that when I went into the book, I was expecting two different voices, and I could not tell who wrote what. How has that come about? Is it because you've been writing together for so long?
I think so, and it's the process that we use of having, we're both writing every chapter. So a lot of times the difference in voice comes when authors decide to divide up their chapters and do one author writes one main character and the other writes the other main character, which is a valid way of doing it. And it makes sense that you'll have characters that sound very different, but of course everything else sounds different as well. And because we're both going through every sentence and every paragraph, it doesn't sound exactly like either one of us if you compare to what we've published on our own in the past. But it sounds it's cohesive because we're both running through it and kind of keeping the consistency.
Yeah, I've co-written books with Claire Lydon and Harper Bliss, and with those two projects, like we did a chapter, like we had one POV, and then we would alternate chapters, which was kind of nice because, like, when we were talking earlier about like co-writing and how it kind of speeds up the process, that was pretty fast because, like, since I co-wrote with them when I was in the U.S. and they were in Europe. And so when I would wake up in the morning, like the chapter would be there waiting for me, and then I would write mine. And then so by the end of the day, we were like 2 chapters in, and so it went really fast. But and it was an excellent experience. It helps you grow as a writer because you would have an idea in your head. And so, but then when I would sit down and read the chapter, they would phrase something just in a certain way, or they would have like a character do a certain thing, and it kind of changed what I was already planning to do. And it was kind of fun to have to pivot to that. And it kind of challenged you to think outside of the box a bit more, which was exciting. And but the way Miranda and I do it, it challenges us in a different way. Because again, like I do the first draft, she does the second draft, and then I do the third draft, and then we kind of work on the final draft together once we get it back from the editor. But again, you're just reacting even in faster time because things do change drastically. Because like I can give Miranda, I try to aim for like 1,000 to 1,500 words for the chapter. And then when I get it back, it's usually double. And then like I'll be reading it later that afternoon, and I see just how much polish it already has, and so I'm able to add just a little bit more, like change, like make the verbs more dynamic and stuff like that, the little things. And it's just amazing to watch how quickly it can come together, and it does stay with the same voice.
And one of the things that you don't notice usually, well, that I think most of us don't notice in our writing, is when you repeat the same words or you have a favorite phrase that you use, and that it's easier to catch those when and have more variety when you're writing, I think, in the way that we do, because they stand out. Like, I don't see it in my own writing, but I see it in someone else's instantly. The word that I wouldn't use that they're using 25 times, I'm just going to be crossing that out every time. And the same when TV is reading through mine. So we're more able to see those instances, and also looking at like the way something's been said. A lot of times I know I wouldn't have written it this way, but actually this is good. This is like, it's a great way of saying it. I'm not going to change that just because I would have said it differently. So that adds, and getting to a point where where you're not changing everything to be more like, oh, this is how I would do it. But recognizing, oh, this is great. Okay, I'm leaving that. That's perfect.
Because when you were talking about getting rid of certain words, like we'll have certain words that start with a letter, and we'll be like, this is the book brought to you by the letter P, because we have to go and delete all the P words or something like that.
It's a good way of doing it for us. I don't know if it would work for everyone.
Why did you choose Vegas for the beginning?
In this case, so we had a few concepts, I think, going into this one. We really wanted to do the, the accidental and the waking up married type of story. So that was when we revisited it and got rid of the whole other movie concept. What we landed on was the waking up married, and there aren't that many places that you can do that, but Vegas is definitely one of the popular choices. So just coming up with I think the challenge for it was trying to make it somewhat believable, because of course it's absurd. I mean, it's one of those popular movie tropes, popular TV tropes that in real life just is crazy. But having to come up with, well, how do you get two people to Vegas? Why are they there? That's a believable reason. And why would they act in this way? That's completely crazy. So
It does happen, though. I've known people who've done it.
it makes it, I think, more important to say, how do we actually ground this in reality? How would this happen? How would this happen to me? And I feel like, I'm not the type of person that would say, oh yeah, I could easily just see that. Oh yeah, I would go to Vegas and that would totally happen to me. And no, not at all. So bringing that into each scenario and saying, well, could I see that happening? Well, yeah, okay, maybe that's believable.
It's like putting a puzzle together. I really like puzzles. And so that's what writing a story is. You're just creating a picture and everything. You're slotting the pieces in to make sure everything works cohesively. Mm-hmm. So that's, and it's the fun part of writing. It's the challenge. But yeah, we try to make it, obviously it's kind of a fantastic story where you're like, well, that really can't happen. But then we try to be like, but could it?
Right. But maybe it could. And I think part of that in this story was knowing, first, that we didn't want them to figure it out the next day, which so many times, the waking, it's always the waking up married in Vegas, and they figure it out within minutes. Why am I wearing a wedding ring? And what is and then they have to go on from there. But I think we liked the idea that this thing happened, and then the circumstances separated them immediately, and they didn't figure it out until this was a distant, hazy, alcohol-fueled memory from to the point, who was that person and how would I even find them again? Because this has, my life has moved on. Now what do I do? And we wanted to bring them back together a few months later when really everything that could go wrong in both of their lives had happened. And they were just at this low point of desperation, because it was the only way that made sense to us to have them be able to need each other and give it a chance. Because otherwise, wouldn't you just take the easy way out, sign the paperwork? Yeah. Why bother? Who this person? You've moved on. You're back to your normal life. Just sign it and be done. But we had to give them a reason that wasn't going to happen.
So now that the book's been out for a little while, looking back at it, what's your favorite part of the book, and who's your favorite secondary character?
I think for me, I really liked the sister as a secondary character. I liked having someone who was younger that was having to make decisions and doing it in a different way. And I think having that character sometimes, that your main character has to kind of take care of, and it brings out a different side in them. So I really enjoyed those interactions, and I enjoyed at times having the sister be able to say the thing that nobody else could say to her, like toward the not to give too many spoilers, but toward the end when when somebody has to slap some sense into her, it can be the sister, like a little sister can say anything. And everybody else might be thinking of it, but the sister is the one that can just be like, "Are you stupid?"
I have to lean towards Cord, and that's simply because I grew up in California, but then I moved to Colorado, and Cord was like a lot of the guys that I just knew in Colorado, like kind of quiet, but always really more observant than you actually gave them credit for. And I enjoyed the few little nuggets Cord said to Drew to like jog her to be like, "You're living your life wrong. You need to fix some things," and stuff like that. And he just gave it just reminded me of home a bit, since I've been away from Colorado for about 20 years now. And it was just kind of nice where, he was a nice guy, the kind of guy you can call in the middle of the night to help you if your car breaks down, and also who can give you that one piece of advice that you've needed to hear at the exact moment. I've met and known so many guys like that.
So what's next in co-writing, and then what's next individually for each of you?
Well, this is perfectly timed question, because we're starting a new co-write tomorrow morning. We've been plotting it for the past week. We are starting, am I allowed to give a little bit of the story away?
Yeah.
We're having 2 lawyers who are kind of going to be duking it out for one partnership position in their office. So it's an enemies to lovers, and set in Boston.
We also have the second / final season of our Vela series, a London love story that we're also. That one will be, the episodes will be starting, I think we have it now on the calendar for the beginning part of September. We've had to make a few adjustments with editors' schedules, but we have those, we write those episodes, like a small portion every day. We do 5 scenes per week, so we write 1 scene each day on those. So we'll be revisiting that.
Thank you very much for your time today. And do you have any parting words for your readers?
Well, thank you for reading, because we definitely couldn't do this without having readers who come back loyally every book and keep giving us a chance. So thank you.
Yeah, the readers are the reason we twist ourselves into knots and we'll go 20, 30 hours straight at the end to get the book out, because we never want to disappoint them. And their support and their kind words and everything they give back to us makes this career the best career.